Please join me in welcoming our first speaker on the stage. We have with us Akshay Heranjal from the Purple Ink Studio.
Out of all the works that we've been doing in our studio, I think this one, the one that I'm going to talk to you all about, holds a very special place in our heart. This is the story of the Tapmi Center that we just built in Manipal. Manipal is a small town in coastal Karnataka, very close to Mangalore, and it provides a fascinating context. Actually, more than 60% of the people in Manipal are actually students. So there's about 25 to 30,000 students who are actually the floating population. And the entire infrastructure of the city from the 1950s has been sort of corresponding to that. One of the things that we realized that most of the idea of infrastructure in the city, which is essentially the universities, the academic buildings, and all the colleges and hospitals that are there in the city, have always been very isolated, introverted. There's no life after the college hours. And the idea of community or social spaces never sort of existed. And most of the other places that are around cannot hold the 25, 30,000 students that are extremely active after the college hours. And we are actually doing quite a few works in the city. And one of the things that we really wanted to do was to redefine the way traditional academic buildings are happening in the city and find ways to reinterpret, college life. So this is the Tapmi campus. It's a little outside Manipal. We're doing about 3 or 4 projects in the campus, and it's got a fantastic context. It's got a forest on one side, and it's got a beautiful view of the valley on the other. But the building that we actually started off with, which was one of our first buildings, is a very small 5,000 square feet site, and the site is actually bordered by road around. One of the first thoughts that we had was, how do you look at buildings to be active after college hours? Was one of the things that we felt was, can this building become a thoroughfare? Is it possible for you to just walk through the building and reach the other side, because the road across allows you to actually connect to the next side of the buildings? We wanted to keep the whole idea of public spaces very active. And the program was actually quite straightforward. So what we essentially felt that the kind of requirements that the academic building had, which was essentially classrooms, maker spaces, incubation spaces, admin areas, etc., could actually be done in just a G+1 structure. So we started by aligning the building along the side, and then we actually scooped out the center. We added a secondary connection and detached the whole incubation space that was there on the top, and allowed this whole open space in front, which almost becomes like a spillover space for people. And when you have a very small site, instead of finding more place to add social and community spaces, we said, is there a possibility for the terrace to be used as a community space? And then we realized that people actually don't walk on the first floor or the terrace. So we said, let's get the terrace down. That essentially becomes the amphitheater. And with the kind of footprint that we had, we said, let's connect it from the road which is on the top there, and allow people to walk through the building so that it allows you to use the whole space as if it becomes a part of your daily thoroughfare. With that, you have the amphitheater that almost tucks the building down. And on the eastern side, we actually opened it up in a way where we started stepping it down to create more intimate spaces. But for us to use the terrace, it's extremely difficult without a roof, because Manipal has extremely heavy rains. And with the kind of summers also that's really harsh, we said we need to find a way to reinterpret this as well. So we looked back and we realized that Varanasi has always been a place where you got this idea of the stepped ghats and the beautiful chhatris or the canopies or the parasols that you have. So we started working on this idea of reinterpreting this, looking back at our own history, and started finding ways to adapt this in the context of the whole building. This actually led us to creating 12 parasols, and these were varying in diameters of 6 meters to 9 meters. And essentially, these come together following a sort of a framework that we put together, which allows it to connect seamlessly, and at the same time, it functions independently as well. When you look at it from the top, you realize that the parasols actually start merging with the forest that's around in a way, and bamboo we felt was a natural material that could adapt itself really well and could have the ability of able to span the 6 to 9 meters that we had in mind. So it became a material of choice for us. Sectionally, the amphitheater actually starts to dominate, and the build form actually starts getting tucked in, and the parasols actually start becoming a tree-like shade, and the idea of the process of making starts becoming more interesting. Here's a small glimpse of the whole process where the building starts taking shape. It's a small 5,000 square feet site, but with the kind of context and the intent that we had, started becoming more interesting when it started coming together. Especially when we are working with large organizations like Manipal, Mahe, it's very important for us to stand our ground and start finding ways of talking about how we are able to conceive the idea and then take it through. Structure was simple. We've always felt that the idea of structure becoming architecture and the idea of architecture becoming interiors is a very important part of our life. And we like to leave it bare and exposed, and we like to keep the system open. For the finishes, we actually chose red oxide because we wanted to allow the local craftsmen who are actually from the neighboring areas to sort of become an active part of the whole community space and start becoming a part of the process of making itself. And then we collaborated very closely with bamboo teams and with structural consultants to sort of define the idea of the intent of the parasol, the scale, and possibilities of people working with craftsmen, the bamboo craftsmen who had never worked on a scale like this. And we always look to empower people who've probably used it on a different scale but like to scale it up and find new ways of empowering them and making it stronger in terms of how they can start reinterpreting their process of making as well. The bamboo parasols actually start becoming extensions of the landscape to a point where these man-made canopies start integrating with the ecosystems, almost becoming like playful natural umbrellas for the academic blocks. And we always felt that the building needs to frame itself and needs to start finding ways of engagement with the settings, with the surrounding, in a way more playful, but allows the academic blocks like these to start getting reinterpreted in ways unimagined. We also realize that there needs to be ways of how you look at the building from where you are inside. And these were ways where we could actually start framing what was outside and in a way encourage this whole sort of a dialogue of the context of where the building sits and what you're looking at. Inclusivity or porous spaces has been a very important idea in the way we've been working on academic blocks. And we always feel that places have to be accessible for everyone. So when we told a photographer friend who had come down to shoot, Suryan, who was there, and we told him that the ramp actually allows anyone to actually walk in, he jokingly said, "What about cows?" And we said, "Let's try." So we actually let a couple of cows come in. We let them loose, and the building, without a main entrance of sorts, allows it to become more porous and starts talking of ways where you start reinterpreting the idea of very strongly driven programs but open-ended and loose in a way where it starts finding ways to become more community-driven spaces and social spaces rather than rigid academic blocks. We also wanted to make sure that the spaces are intimate enough. So you also have places that sort of step down on the eastern side, allowing it to become, spaces which can be used differently. And on the other side, which actually faces the west, there are positions from where you can actually see the setting sun, which opens itself to the valley. And we also realize that during monsoons, people actually end up carrying the umbrellas and then start walking through the building, not realizing that they're actually within that whole idea of the canopy, actually making it feel incredibly light, almost like you're walking under a tree cover. We also love our spaces to be used with the idea of ownership, because we always feel that academic buildings are usually very disconnected from the people who actually work there. And we realize it's important for academic spaces like these to become very homegrown, where they're actually able to claim spaces and make it their own. So a lot of the spaces inside are actually left open-ended for people to find their interpretation of how it is. I think just a few slides left, my time is up there, but we've also realized the interest with which we work needs this whole idea of productive greens to start becoming a part of the whole system. So we worked really hard on creating a sort of a very simple ecosystem in place where you're able to start producing your own greens and start finding ways in which the building sort of starts representing itself very differently and goes beyond the idea of academic buildings. And with the intent with which we are doing a lot of buildings all around in the same city, we realize that if we are able to do this, where it starts creating a micro ecosystem of sorts, there is this possibility that they can start adapting to that context, start speaking to each other, start sharing resources, and find new ways of reinterpreting buildings that start becoming not just a part of the community but start defining its role in the city. Thank you so much for this.